Hello, my name is Dr. Jeffrey Barsuk. I am the Robert Herstick Professor of Medicine and Medical Education at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine. I currently serve as the Executive Medical Director of Northwestern Simulation. I'd like to welcome you back to our new series on simulation and healthcare education for 2022. Today, we plan to talk about creating and ensuring a safe learning environment for simulation. I have the distinct honor of interviewing my friend and colleague, Dr. Sharon Griswold. Sharon is a professor of emergency medicine at Penn State College of Medicine and very well versed in simulation and using simulation to promote patient safety. And we almost always start our podcast series with letting our interviewee give a little bit of information about themselves and their background.
Jeff, thank you for that introduction. As you said, I am a professor of emergency medicine at Penn State Medical School, and I see patients in the emergency department at the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center in Hershey, PA. As you know, I'm now also a medical consult and review physician at Merck. I have spent my entire academic career in medical education, and I have really been a firm believer in experiential learning through simulation for my entire career. We are all learners by doing, and having the experiences as an emergency medicine program director, I used to say that I had to create those experiences that I couldn't guarantee that our learners would have. There's no question that being able to script our learning objectives and make sure that our learners get exposed to challenges in knowledge acquisition, decision-making, diagnosis, procedural skills, and the challenges of working with other human beings in stressful situations. There is no better way to improve patient safety in my mind.
Well, Sharon, I know that creating a safe learning environment is something that's deep and passionate to your heart. You know, and you're making me think back about a time that we were both at the IMSH annual conference. And in the beginning of right before a plenary session, I think they had Sim Wars. And I will never forget, I already knew you at the time, but you know, who's going to be brave enough to put themselves out there and actually participate in a simulation? And Sharon, you were up there. I'll never forget the case. There was actually a patient where there was water nearby and you had to make a decision about shocking the patient. And it was really profound for me to be able to see someone at your level actually participating in a simulation. And you had won me over ever since, because it attested to your humility and your humanness. And that's why I'm so excited to be interviewing you today.
I think I remember the Sim Wars that you're talking about. And I couldn't agree more that it was a really career-changing opportunity for me to put myself back into the shoes of being a learner, of being vulnerable, and of not wanting to make mistakes in front of my peers. So we were able to compete in Sim Wars on multiple occasions. And I think it was an incredible learning experience.
So you were up there on stage, and there were hundreds of people watching you. Fortunately, when we do sims for assessment or for practice, you know, there's not hundreds of people watching. How did that feel going up there, knowing that there was a crowd watch you? I mean, I think you felt psychologically safe, or maybe you wouldn't have done it. It was volunteer. Or did you not feel psychologically safe? And maybe that's our perfect segue into what does it mean to be feeling safe in an environment like that?
So I don't think that environment was safe.
Okay.
I remember the first time that we ever competed in a Sim Wars event, and we competed against some of the society's board membership as a team. And I think I had folks I think I remember Walter Epic came up to me afterward and was so upset that we had been exposed to such an unsafe learning environment. It was a tremendous experience from an empathy standpoint, more so than a feeling safe or comfortable standpoint. But we can get into those parts, because being safe doesn't mean that to me. So,
well, also though, I think it gives you perspective, and this is important. It gives you perspective on what it feels like to be a learner and what the environment should be for your learners because of how you felt during that session. I have participated in SIMs, and they have enlightened me into saying this is not the experience, or this is the experience that I want my learners to have. So let's just segue right into it then. What is a safe simulation learning environment?
You know the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder? I would say that a phrase that I've used on multiple occasions is that safety is in the heart and the mind of the learner. So we can set the stage and do what we can to try to ensure what we like to call that optimal learning environment. But just because we say something is quote unquote safe does not make it so.
And that's the most important point we're going to make today, is you can't just turn a light switch on and say, this is a safe learning environment. It's going to be safe for all the learners. This is an iterative process with learners that learn over time to trust and that it truly is a safe environment from experience. Because just because I say, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this today, and this is how the sim session is going to go, and this is how our debrief session is going to go, it may not be safe for the learner because they haven't felt that mutual trust and respect yet, which takes time. But that being said, I do want to point out that the Society for Simulation has their own written definition of it. And to quote them, they say that a feeling, explicit or implicit, within a simulation-based activity that participants are comfortable participating, speaking up, sharing thoughts, and asking for help as needed without concern for retribution. And to me, that just scratches at the surface because it doesn't talk about physical safety, number one. And number two, there's way more into it that's beyond just the concern about retribution.
I agree. And when you say those things, I feel like I could pick up off a few different points of some of the things that you touched on that really resonate with me. I would say the first part, again, of talking about safety being in the heart and mind of the learner is that we cannot control for our learners' lived experiences, for their biases that they bring into the environment. As a pearl, I would say one of the things that worked for me, as you said, maybe they need to get more comfortable knowing that their simulation experiences are going to come as build, right? So if we're calling this a formative learning experience and they will not be graded, but then, what happens in sim stays in sim, gets beyond sim. Why should they trust us for that setting the stage in that environment that we said that we would maintain in the beginning? So, I think perhaps I'm jumping ahead. That's the Vegas rules, right? Like one of the ways we can establish safety in the environment is to make sure that we do an adequate pre-brief of expectations, timing, so that our learners get a little bit more accustomed to what they are going to experience in a session. We've talked before about that Sim Wars experience, kind of safe, not safe. And I have to say that over my years as an educator, learners are more than happy to make mistakes in front of me. They don't want to make mistakes in front of their peers. But we can't say it's safe for them.
No, only they can say it. And like I want to iterate it over and over again, is that the reason that they trust Sharon Griswold is because you've worked with them multiple times and they know they can trust you. I also have that fortune. I hope my students and residents that I work with trust me as well. The few things I like I really hit in the pre-briefing that are just experiential more than anything that I've learned from doing is ensuring that everyone uses people's proper names up front. If it's a team-based scenario or more than one are involved, with proper pronouns. And then, as you mentioned, the Vegas contract, letting them know that this is where they can make mistakes, but also trying to establish what we call the fiction contract, so that, the more you get out of it is the more you put into it. And then the final thing, and not necessarily the final thing, but really important, about mutual respect for everyone in the room, realizing this is where we're learning together. I don't even like using the term I'm the teacher. I like calling myself a facilitator. And then I'll never forget the next thing I do, because my colleague, Dr. David Salzman, was a trainee of mine during a central line insertion simulation. And he was very upset with me because he didn't know what to expect out of the central line model. And you may recall that one of the models we were using at the time had an external jugular vein. And David had never worked with the model, so he assumed the external jugular vein was actually the internal jugular vein. And it was on me because I didn't properly orient David to the simulator. And I think, therefore, it was psychologically unsafe for David because he felt duped in a way where he couldn't succeed. So that was a big lesson learned for me.
Getting back to the initial thing of setting the stage, when I meet with new learners, I am completely explicit that even if I miss some of the other elements in a pre-brief, the thing I never forget to say is the reason that I'm here is because I care about helping you be a better clinician. That's it. I don't promise safety, really. I promise learning. I tell them to come and make as many mistakes as they can, as you said. Make the mistakes here. Let me help you. The more that you show me your gaps, the more I can help fill them, and the better and more well-prepared you'll be to provide safer care in the clinical environment. And it's not about us. That's the other thing I like to say sometimes, is that it's not about us. It's about the patients that we take care of.
Interesting point. Dr. McGahey, our mentor, I will say, I think he's your mentor too, always
Indeed.
says that in the sim, it's about the learner, right? But I always want to caveat that and say, okay, in the simulation, it may be about the learner, but with the end goal in mind of why we're doing this. And that's the patient, to keep the patients as safe as possible. And I would agree, I'd rather have a learner be a little uncomfortable and a little unsafe during a simulation than to feel that way at the bedside. So maybe we should restate this altogether and just say we try and create as safe of a learning environment as we possibly can by the interventions we're talking about. But recognize that you are going to be uncomfortable in here because no one likes to make mistakes, right? We all want to be great at what we do. Sharon, you create an environment where do an assessment of my performance on this task, and I want to hear what you have to say. Bill McGahey talks about this a lot, about assessment apprehension. And by doing these things to create learners that feel comfortable coming to you, we address assessment apprehension. Assessment is part of learning, right? It has to be integrated into curricula. So when you're doing an assessment, do you take any particular steps that way to make your learners more comfortable with that? And what do you do?
So I describe the esteemed Dr. McGahey's words in a different way.
Okay.
I like the phrase weaponized feedback as